It was just after 2 in the morning when Sarah finally clocked out of her shift at the diner. The night was still and unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like a blanket smothering all the familiar sounds of the city. Her apartment was a 20-minute walk, a route she'd taken hundreds of times without a second thought. But tonight, something felt different. The air was colder, sharper. As she turned onto her street, she noticed most of the streetlights were out. There was a long, dark stretch of road, punctuated by only a single, flickering pool of orange light about halfway down. And standing directly under that lone streetlight was a figure, a man. He was tall, unnaturally so, and stood perfectly still. There was the kind of stillness that wasn't peaceful, but rigid, like a statue. A cold knot formed in Sarah's stomach. Her first instinct was to cross the street, but something held her back. Curiosity? A strange, morbid fascination? He wasn't doing anything threatening. He was just through there. As she got closer, she realized he wasn't facing the road or waiting for someone. He was facing a house, staring intently at the front window, his back to her. The house was dark, just like all the others. Who was he watching? Sarah slowed her pace, her heart starting to hammer against her ribs. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft scuff of her own sneakers on the pavement. She was about 50 feet away when the man moved. It wasn't a sudden movement, but a slow, deliberate one that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. He didn't turn his body, but his arm, the one closest to her, began to lift. It rose slowly, methodically, until his index finger was pointing directly at her. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. The distance between them suddenly felt like nothing. The man was still facing the house, his arm extended back towards her in an impossible-looking angle. And then, his head began to tilt. It tilted slowly, unnaturally far to the side, accompanied by a faint, dry crackling sound like old wood splintering. His neck had to be broken, but he was still standing. His head was now almost parallel to his shoulder, his unseen face still directed at the house, but his arm and that one pointing finger remained fixed on her. That was it. The spell was broken. Pure animal terror surged through her. Sarah didn't scream. She didn't even gasp. She just turned and ran. She ran faster than she'd ever run in her life, her keys digging into her palm. She didn't look back. She couldn't bear to see if he was following, if that impossibly tilted head was now turned towards her. The sound of her own frantic footsteps echoed in the silent street. She fumbled with her keys at her apartment door, her hands shaking so violently it took 3 tries to get the key in the lock. She slammed the door shut, bolted it, and leaned against it, panting, her lungs burning. Her entire body was trembling. For a few moments, she just stood there in the dark of her entryway, listening, silence. With shaking fingers, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Her voice was a ragged whisper as she explained what she saw. The man, the streetlight, the pointing, the neck. The dispatcher was calm, professional, but Sarah could hear an underlying urgency in her voice as she promised to send a patrol car immediately. They told her to stay inside and away from the windows. Less than 5 minutes later, the comforting flash of red and blue lights painted her walls. Peeking through a crack in her blinds, she saw the police cars pull up to the spot where the man had been. The streetlight was still on, but the space beneath it was empty. He was gone. 2 officers got out, their flashlights cutting beams through the darkness. She watched as they approached the house the man had been staring at. One of the officers knocked on the door while the other scanned the yard with his flashlight. Sarah stayed glued to her window, watching this scene unfold. A few minutes later, an older man and woman came to the door, wrapped in bathrobes. The officer was talking to them, pointing back down the street, presumably in Sarah's direction. After a few more minutes of conversation, the officer who had been talking to the couple walked back to his car and spoke into his radio. Sarah couldn't hear what he was saying, but she saw the way his shoulders tensed. Then she saw the other officer, the one who had been searching the yard, walk over to the first. He said something, and both of them just stopped. They stood there, looking at the house, then back at the empty spot under the streetlight. Even from her window, Sarah could see it. They looked pale, genuinely spooked. About 20 minutes later, an officer knocked on her door. It was one of the men she'd seen outside. He looked young, but his face was grim, etched with a worry that seemed out of place on a routine call. He asked her to go over her story again, every single detail. She told him everything, her voice still trembling. When she finished, the officer was quiet for a long moment. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low, "you did the right thing by calling us. And the right thing by running. Why?" Sarah whispered, "What is it? Did you find him?" The officer shook his head slowly, no. "He was gone before we got here. But that house he was staring at, the one he was pointing at you from, he took a breath. The couple who lives there? They called us an hour before you did. They filed a report about a tall man standing outside their bedroom window, just staring in. When they called, he was tapping on the glass. By the time the first patrol car got there, he had moved from the window to the streetlight. It seems he was just waiting. A wave of ice-cold dread washed over Sarah, so intense it made her feel sick. He wasn't just staring at a random house. He had been focused on them. And then, when she appeared, he had shifted his focus. That slow, deliberate point wasn't a random gesture. It was a selection. The police did a full sweep of the neighborhood but found nothing. No footprints, no disturbances, nothing. The man under the streetlight simply vanished. Sarah never walked home late again. For months, she would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced she could hear a faint tapping sound on her window. The image of that slowly tilting head and that pointing finger was burned into her memory. The case remained open, another strange, unsolved file in a quiet suburb. But the questions haunt everyone who hears the story. Who was that man? What did he want with the couple in that house? And why, when Sarah came along, did he choose her next? What was he pointing her out for? We may never know the answers. Some things that lurk in the dark are meant to remain a mystery. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? The next time you're walking alone at night and you see a single, solitary figure under a streetlight, you might want to cross the street. Or better yet, just turn around and run. What do you guys think? What was his intention? Why that specific house, and why did he then target Sarah? Let me know your theories down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more chills. Stay safe out there.